strong that the hard times praised us. From base life roots to the freeway nights, we turn small rooms into launchpad lights. Yeah.
Mr. Leigh Steinberg, you said that, what was the awards that you just got?
Oh, Lifetime Achievement from the Orange County Sports Commission, an award from a mental health group. It's what's important is not that I get awards; it's that the causes that are important in making a difference in the world get recognized.
I was just thinking about you yesterday because the interview came out with Chris Johnson, and I'm sure you're aware, with ALS. And when I saw the interview, at first I thought that my video had paused, but then I realized that he was talking with his eyes through a computer because he had lost his speech. You do a lot. I mean, I think you're doing the most in professional sports as far as moving brain health forward. What movement have you seen in this last year? I mean, it's probably been about 6 months since we talked.
So I think that awareness is rising. The one thing people are not as aware of is the whole concept of subconcussive hit. So each time at the line of scrimmage, a lineman hits a lineman, it produces a little modicum of brain change. So you could have an offensive lineman who played high school, college, and pro football, who suffered 10,000 subconcussive events, none of which he's aware of, none of which are diagnosed, but the aggregate almost certainly does the same thing as being knocked out 4 or 5 times. But we now have a concussion protocol in football where they have spotters trying to find impaired players. The other good news is that there are some encouraging therapies that seem to be able to bring back neural connectivity and rewire a concussed brain. One of them is called RTMS, which is magnets hitting the brain that seem to redo neural pathways. And another one is neurofeedback, which seems to be helpful. So until this point, it was always thought that the brain, once impaired, only descended, it never got better. But now we've got some promising research. I met with a doctor the other day who drilled into the skull of Alzheimer's patients and put stem cells in them and had very promising returns. And he thinks, Dr. Christopher Duma, that it could have the same impact on concussions.
Are they noticing and utilizing any type of protocols as far as I've had some friends that have worked in the microdosing space and things like that. Have you started to see, or has there been connectivity that way?
Yes, there's some thought that for athletes with PTSD, they're talking about ibogaine with and then the whole microdosing is thought to have some efficacy, but we need more studies.
When the people are doing things like that, is this generally after the fact? And is this after they retire, or are they encouraging, proactive type of, whether it be supplements or, treatment during the time that the players are playing?
So let's start with the fact that there's a genetic allele which is predictive of multiple concussions or susceptibility. So you start with testing every player for that. Then you look at, is there anything we can do to prophylactically protect the brain and make it less apt to be concussed? Then there are substances which, after a player suffers a concussion, can be applied to stop so much swelling from occurring. Because the real problem is inflammation, internal inflammation. It's the whole key to health, but it's also a key in this area, and to stop that from happening. And so, no, there are protocols that can be used while a player is playing. And of course, I've told you before that I don't think it's a great idea to have young kids playing tackle football, because their brain is much more apt to get concussed. They take longer to recover, and the basic development of the brain probably goes till someone's 25. So you could be stultifying the effect of normal brain development.
Do you think that that will bring, I mean, the more and more awareness that we have? So, you know, as a kid, my parents didn't have that thought process. So we played tackle football since we were in fourth grade, and we didn't have heads up tackling. So we would just duck our head, and we got what was called a stick mark. I don't know if you knew that term, but it was almost a badge of honor, Leigh, when we would hit our head against someone else's helmet and we would get their paint on our helmet. We would call it a stick mark. And that was something that it was almost, again, a badge of honor. When we got done with the game, we looked at it and said, oh, I've got 4 purple, stick marks. It means I had a good game. Do you think that
Yeah,
now?
remember, Kelly, that they used to have television shows that showed the most dramatic hits. And the whole nomenclature was, he got lit up, his bell got rung, he got knocked into space. And it was treated, as you said, as a badge of honor to hit somebody hard in the head and knock them out. And so they would have highlights of that. And basically, highlights of someone becoming brain impaired. But the whole culture has changed in terms of this. And whether it's teaching young kids how to block and tackle without using the head, whether it's not having them play until they've had some form of brain development, there actually are college programs like the Ivy League where they don't hit during training camp. They don't hit during practices. They save all the actual contact for the game itself. And that's been seen to drop concussions by a fair amount because they occur in training camp and practice.
Can those teams compete? Because when you were talking about the Ivy Leagues, do you think that the teams, say SEC, Big Ten, can those type of practices be implemented in that sector and people still compete at the highest level?
So you're talking about the 4 super conferences and the SEC and the Big Ten and the ACC. And basically, what's happening today is those teams are using NIL so effectively that they're pulling away talent-wise from every other conference. And you have the haves and the have-nots. I think eventually you'll see those conferences break away from the NCAA, and they'll do their own television negotiations. They'll do their own rules. They don't need the NCAA. But again, we're going to have and have-nots. The answer is, if everyone was implementing the same practices, and if it was the rule that those 3 or 4 conferences didn't hit during training camp or during the season, then you wouldn't notice the difference on the playing field because you're modeling the plays during practice and you're just saving the actual hits for the game itself. So a fan wouldn't notice any difference. They just see hard-nosed football.
When you talked about the NIL, I thought it was interesting because it was, I can't remember, I think it was the second episode that we got a chance to be able to talk. It was the NIL was instated, I believe, either the day before our interview or the day after, but we knew it was coming. There was already the reports. One of the things that you said is that they should have taken more time to prepare and set things up because they don't know what they're about to get into. And it was a prophecy. I mean, and now we're seeing where, back in the day of, say, UNLV basketball, right? Early 90s, Jerry Tarkanian. There's a lot of scandals, different things like that. And now we're seeing the same type of behavior, but it's just out in the open. So it's like, where colleges were paying kids, but they were paying it under the table and being able to get the best athletes. Now it's over the table and those things are happening. How could it have been set up differently so we wouldn't have the challenges we're having right now with NIL?
This is going to be hard for me to say because I've spent 52 years advocating for player compensation. And there was a problem. The players sitting on college campuses who came from economically challenged circumstances might have been sending part of the scholarship check home to their family. And because they were limited not to work to supplement their income, they lived at a lower standard of living in some cases than their non-athletic peers on the campus. And they looked at their number being sold at the student store, and they looked at the big crowds in stadia, and they looked at the big TV contracts, and they felt like that they were being mistreated. So you probably could have solved that problem by taking athletes at need and giving them another $5,000 to $10,000 to equalize their lifestyle. Instead, the quarterback at the University of Michigan started out 2 years ago, and he was offered $4 million, and so he was going to LSU. But a big Michigan alum stepped in and offered him $14 million, and he never went to LSU, he went to Michigan. So you've got the college from high school as the first point of NIL, and you've got the transfer portal as the second. And schools like Ohio State and Texas and Alabama are at such a different level because they've got more alums, more resources, more collectives assisting in the process. And the good effect of NIL is it could keep some players staying in school instead of coming out early because they're not feeling economic pressure. That part's a positive. But the rest of it, again, as I said, is elevated about 3 or 4 conferences to be at a completely different status level than everyone else. The 5-star player is going to go in a free economic system where the money is, and that will be the number one criteria.
So how could, well, obviously once you let it out of the bag, and this is what you were talking about, quite a few episodes ago, you were talking about once you let it out of the bag, you can't bring it back in, you can't wrangle it back in. But it seemed like when NIL came, it just almost exploded, and then they made up the rules later on. It was like they, as opposed to working through this thing and saying, hey, we can set these things up. Maybe it's trust funds. Maybe it's making sure that the kids have, a setup drop. That the $14 million is not available to them immediately, but it's over time. This is just my thought process. Is that something that maybe could have put things in a different perspective for the players?
Absolutely. But you had the House court case come in, and it said that 20% of the average athletic budget for that conference could be spent on player compensation. So then all of a sudden that was a formula. And there have been political bills, a Democratic bill, a Republican bill. Trump's tried to put his arms around this. There are all sorts of interveners Um, and this story is not totally put together yet because they either government, the NCAA, someone's going to put some restrictions on this to keep it within bounds. One of the problems with all this is if you're giving 20% of your athletic budget and 75% of that's going to college football, and 15% of it's going to college basketball, and 5% of it's going to the women's basketball, what happens to the other non-revenue sports down the line? In other words, if the reason we have college athletics is because we think that athletics teaches educational experiences, that it's got values like self-discipline, um, uh, postponing future current satisfaction for future satisfaction, teamwork, processing bodies of information in real time, courage under pressure. If that's supposed to be a set of values and experiences that help, then the charge would be to the broadest number of students who could do it, and it would be volleyball and gymnastics and a variety of different sports. But they're going to have problems getting funded today, and the whole concept of Title IX is all the work they've done to equalize women's athletics is in danger.
Explain to the person that maybe doesn't understand Title IX, doesn't understand the intricacies. How would you explain that to them?
That Title IX says whatever a university does for male athletes, it has to do for female athletes. That it's got to provide funding at relatively equal levels. The problem with that is that the amount of revenue that college football generates relative to the rest of the sports, or at certain universities, college men's basketball, is so disproportionate that when you then have that allocation of revenue and it goes heavily to the men's football or basketball program, what does it do for women's sports? Now, someone would have to assert Title IX, and I doubt that in this current administration, the Justice Department would see that as a high priority. But that's the reality of it, is that the whole spirit of Title IX conflicts with the reality of where the revenue comes from in sport.
Mm. And that's sometimes it's an unpopular conversation to have. I was just on a plane with a woman, and she's talked about, equal pay in sports. And I said, I'm a girl dad. I completely understand. I know you're a girl dad too. Your daughter is amazing. And I'm a girl dad, but I asked her, I said, well, on Fridays, do you and your girls get together and go to a game or go and watch a game? And she was like, oh, no, we don't do that. And I said, well, then how could you expect, if that's the normal thing, that a group of 10 girls isn't getting together and going to Vegas to watch March Madness for women, how can you expect for the revenues to be the same for the player if the support from the fan isn't the same? Does that make sense?
Yes. So the irony is that for years, the justification for not putting women's sports on television was there wasn't enough of a fan base. Mm-hmm. But the tautology there is that if you put the sports on television, you generate a bigger fan base, right? So it goes round and round. Actually, this is the inflection point, the best climate I've seen for women's athletics in my lifetime. And it started with Caitlin Clark and the women's NCAA championship run, and has reflected into the WNBA. And it was the first time, Kelly, ever that I heard men's talk show hosts talking about women's basketball. And that never happened before. And Caitlin Clark started it, and AJ, there's a whole series of promising and telegenic young women playing basketball. But again, it still doesn't relieve the NIL problem.
What challenges do you see that are on the horizon that maybe aren't happening right now? Because with the NIL, because we had this, whenever there's a pendulum swing and it's major. So we had, athletes starving, go into college, lifestyle was low, whatever it was, came from low social economics. And then we had this swing to, now everyone's getting paid like crazy amounts of money. They could even choose not to go pro because they're, one in the NBA, they said that it was a bad thing for him to go in the draft because he got drafted in the second round. And he could have stayed at college and made $5,000 a year, and he's not going to get a contract for that in the NBA. When we swing that far, there's challenges on both sides. We swung. What's the challenges that are on the way that we can't see yet with NIL?
Well, more than with NIL, the biggest threat I see the biggest existential threat is gambling, because there was an impregnable wall set up between sports and gambling. No advertising, no connection, no sports in Las Vegas, all the rest of it. That's all shattered. And inevitably, if gamblers are making a fortune off prop bets, then what would help them is to get inside information about who's playing or not. And the minute that you get inside information to gamblers in return for being paid, whether you're a coach or a referee or whoever it is, or a player, it tilts the balance. And the second thing is shading performance. So that if a gambler knew that a player was going to be less productive on a prop bet, he would alter the odds. And it's inevitable that somewhere in this massive athletic fraternity, we've already seen it in basketball, but it's a real threat. And here's why. Fans love sports because they feel they're unpredictable and they're played on an even playing field, same rules, everyone trying as hard as they can, competition. And if you ever started to get people conspiratorial about the fact that the games were fixed, then sports at the collegiate and pro level would become wrestling, and they challenge every single play. That's an existential threat. The other thing that's happening is massive numbers of new gambling addicts are being created. And if you look at the nonstop advertising, like in a football game, FanDuel, DraftKings, MGM, and it's just like alcohol commercials. They show the good life, they show happiness. And you've got, especially in the younger generation, a whole bunch of people who are betting throughout a game on these prop bets. And inevitably, they will get behind, and then they'll bet more money to try to get even, and they'll lose more money, and you've got a whole new generation of gambling addicts being created that no one's really doing much about.
What do you say to like my friend and I were having this discussion the other day, and I said that there's the challenge is when you make something illegal, most of the time you create a black market for it. Case in point, when we look at prohibition with alcohol, it created the mob, right? And it created a scenario that really enhanced, not that it created the mob itself, but it was enhanced during that time because you had the bootleggers, things like that. And then there's the argument of if you make it legal, now it's not, there's not the taboo to it. But if you make it legal, like you were saying, now people start to question the integrity of the game. Where can we find a happy median in it?
I think that one of the problems is that people who gamble a lot get incentives from the DraftKings and FanDuels of the world. they get a trip to the NCAA, they get tickets, they get. I heard the other day a baseball player actually did a cameo to a bettor in a case that's pretty active. And so that's your lifetime dream, that your favorite baseball player would compliment you and wish you well and everything. But meanwhile, the person is a problem gambler and in debt. So again, unintended consequences. Think of the confluence of gambling, NIL, and conference realignment all coming in quick form. And what was the norm for so long now has been completely disrupted. And what I'm arguing is that had people thought this through and set up guardrails and guidelines, yes, people are going to gamble, go ahead and gamble. But if they could have found a huge enforcement mechanism on the players to make sure they weren't involved with gamblers, you needed to beef up security. You needed to think through if you're creating all these gambling addicts, then do we have programs that can help them go to rehab? So these are all the challenges, and these things have happened so rapidly. It's like the development of AI. We've had such rapid change in the sports landscape. From a financial standpoint, it's wonderful for players, and it's wonderful for sports because there's new revenue streams that are coming in that are greatly enhancing sport. I mean, the pro football just had the biggest increase in salary cap, meaning compensation, in 1 year in its history. So that part of it is working, but the guardrails aren't.
How do you communicate that guardrails to someone when, say, like a NFL, let's take an NFL owner, which you deal with all of them, and you know them very well, and there's an influx of higher revenues, higher profitability, all these things, and then we come and say, but you should have some guardrails, because if not, later on down the road, it's hard to talk to people about the long-term effects. I mean, you've always been a long-term guy. With all your athletes that you've signed, you've talked to them about the charities that they create, the longevity that they have in their career after football or baseball or basketball. But most people aren't thinking with prudence. They're thinking of just right here, right today. How do you get to be able to, bring those two together?
Let me give you an example. If you're trying to sustain sports and keep it healthy, then you'd like to have the largest fan base possible. Contemporary ticket prices screen out younger people, working families. If I owned a team, I would save 10,000 seats every football game for young people, for working families that are distributed under extremely easy pricing and terms. And then at the end of the year, I'd have had 100,000 people, 10 home games, that have been to a game and experienced the environment. And that's how you grow the future. At the current rate, so for example, I think it's a mistake to start parceling out the NFL TV contract to streaming networks, because the reason we have this unique popularity of the NFL and other sports is because if you've got a couple $100 to buy a TV and use rabbit ears, you can get a bunch of NFL games and you can get a bunch of local games. If all of a sudden that changes to pay, it screens people out. So when you're putting them on Netflix and Amazon and places where you have to pay a precise fee, you're narrowing the audience. And that doesn't augur well long term for keeping the sport healthy.
When you were talking about the salary cap, what was the increase in the salary cap in the NFL? Was it this year that the increase was?
Mm-hmm.
What was the difference? How much was it?
It basically has doubled since about 5 years ago, and today it's unbelievable, the influx of revenue. Television is revenue is off the charts. When I started back in 1975, every team as its share of the national TV contract got $2 million. And then they got Fox into the bidding, things got competitive, and it went up to 40 million per team, 70 million per team. Now it's about $300 million before you open your doors. And so television is the straw that's stirring the drink in all this, that revenue. And then you have things like fantasy leagues and merchandising, and stadiums now have jumbo scoreboards, and they have naming rights, and they have premium seating where you get served by a waitress or a waiter. And they've created activity zones where there always are things to do that spin off revenue. It's all about fan experience. And so we're living in the wonderful, this is the golden years of professional and collegiate sports, which is why if baseball actually has a labor stoppage, it's self-destructive. It's like killing the golden goose voluntarily. In other words, because the truth is we've had NFL football without a strike for like 40 years now, and the games are popular, but don't have a work stoppage. That would really hurt. Last time they had a work stoppage, 1994, they had a strike, and the gross receipts went down the next year by 40%.
Do you see that? Do you see that on the horizon? Is that mixing with the right now? Are we on the precipice of something like that?
The issue is the salary cap, and owners, in my view, have incorrectly assessed the reason there's competitive imbalance in baseball. They've blamed it on market size and the resources of the owner. That's not really true. The reason the Dodgers win, certainly they're helped by the fact they can bid on free agents. They have the best scouting. They have the best farm system. They know how to develop players. They have the best view of how to build team chemistry. And if you really look at it, at the standings, a number of smaller market teams are in the lead this year. And they don't have as much money to spend, but they're better run. And so what the major league players are saying is, go ahead and spend some money. You can get it back in baseball by increased attendance. In other words, you can be in Minnesota and still sell out every game. And if you're spending the right amount of money, and there's owners who are not investing in their teams. I happen to live in Orange County, and we have a team called the Angels that is got the worst record in baseball and don't spend anything on free agents.
Why wouldn't they? Is there a reason why an owner would own I mean, because it's a business. Wouldn't they all want to win so their revenues become higher, or is it sometimes people are protecting?
They're protecting themselves, and they're not taking the risk of investing in the team, that then can get you back revenue. In other words, you've got local television rights can be much higher, and people argue, well, there's smaller market size. It doesn't matter if you're the Pittsburgh Steelers. I'll give the best analogy. When Ben Roethlisberger was a rookie, we put out a T-shirt, and basically 700,000 people bought them. 700,000 is bigger than the Metro Pittsburgh uh, population. So it means that the buy rate was so much higher. And in a smaller town, you can get such fanaticism that they'll buy anything. Look at Green Bay. So the truth is, it's just bad business.
When you see the type of decadence that's happening right now, the golden age of sports, of what you were talking about. I lived in Vegas from '99 through 2012, and I went through the golden age of finance. We were there in Vegas, and it was the most decadent time in the history of man. People were coming in and just slinging money everywhere, and it was coming. They were throwing it away like it was trash. All of us, while it was happening, Leigh, we were so excited, and we were like, this is never going to end. It's just going to keep getting bigger, 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 bigger. But what I've noticed over time is that we grow, and then there's a adjustment. When that adjustment happens, there's a lot of times people fall. Inevitably, that's the way that the economy has gone throughout the years. If you look at it, it doesn't stay up all the time. When this thing inevitably falls, how can the people come back from that?
The reason why professional sports are relatively recession proof is that as long as television exists as a loss leader prospect, and by that I mean that the reason Fox bought the NFL was not to make as much money as they spent on rights fees back in advertising. They did it to promote their Monday through Friday broadcasts. And that's where the real value of the network comes. So they will lose money to garner viewers. And as long as that dynamic exists, which we call loss leader bidding, then its revenue is just going to continue to go up and up and up. During the actual depression, sports did just fine because people were looking for an alternative to not just the financial depression, but the emotional depression of living in that time. And so I think that there's no end I can see at this point to where this spiral of economics is going.
When we're talking about contracts, there's a couple that are hot in the media right now, right? So I'm a big Warriors fan, Leigh. I don't know are you a Lakers fan, or do you have an allegiance?
Of course, I'm an everything Los Angeles fan.
So I'm a Warriors fan, and you know the things that are circulating. Draymond opting out, and then the possibility of putting together a deal with LeBron and AD. What does the normal public not understand about the positioning and the contracts that are being put together and how they're being structured? Because you understand this. I mean, this is your life, but we don't understand it.
So, in the sport of basketball, they have limits, salary cap limits, which are govern how much money they can spend in aggregate as a team. Now, in baseball, they have uh, they have penalties that go towards people who spend too much money. So if you spend over a certain amount, then you have to pay a lot of that overage to the league as a fine. Okay, and that money is then redistributed. But not in basketball. Basketball's got a complex set of rules in their collective bargaining agreement that govern how many players they can have, and then they have exceptions, how many players they can assemble at a certain salary level. Now, the way a cap works, let's suppose in football, you have a rookie, and that rookie has a contract that's got a signing bonus in it. For the purposes of the cap, let's say that signing bonus is $10 million and the player signs a 4-year contract. What counts against the cap is the bonus amortized or spread over those 4 years. So the cap number from that signing bonus is $2.5 million for each of the 4 years. And then you add the current salary into it. So let's say the salary is $750. So the cap number for the first year of that contract is a 2.5 amortized and the $750 in salary. So it's 3.250. Got it?
Mm-hmm.
Just a formula. Now, the actual cash that player received was he got the whole $10 million signing bonus and he got the $750. So cash in $10,750,000, but the cap number's $3,250. So depending on how you structure a contract, and generally in football, it's dropping the salary and giving a player a new signing bonus. And then that signing bonus gets spread out over a number of years. That's the way a cap-friendly contract happens. So you get a player who may have a $40 million year coming up, too much against the salary cap. So they take the 40, they give him a new $35 million bonus, the salary becomes 5, and off you go.
It seems like super teams happen in the NBA, but I don't hear about them as much in MLB and in NFL. Or am I just?
They don't have a salary cap in Major League Baseball. In other words, they can spend as much as they want, but they are penalized if it goes over a certain number. So the Dodgers pay a huge tax. But again, having said that, take a look at the standings in Major League Baseball at this point in the season and see how many small market teams like the Tampa Bay Rays, or Milwaukee or Cleveland or Minnesota, smaller cities are leading the leagues.
When I'm talking about super teams too, is like NBA seems to be almost want to assemble 4 or 5 people that they bring in together, they become friends, and then they try and create, like LeBron not started it, but it was big. It came into the press big when he went to the Heat and he assembled the team. And then your Lakers, you remember when Shaq and Kobe were still there, and then he brought in Karl Malone, brought in Gary Payton. I think was Steve Nash at that time too. They brought him in too, but we don't see that as much in NFL, or are we just not aware of it? And we don't see it as much in MLB, or are we not aware of it?
There's smaller numbers of players in basketball, and they generally get to know each other playing in the youth AAU league and in high school, and then they play in tournaments and they get to know each other. And so the relationships with major players around the league tend to be closer. and players have more power. You're not you don't see football players when free agency comes band together, with a left tackle, a quarterback, a defensive lineman, and they all go to the same team. It just doesn't happen, but it happens in basketball. And now you have the intrigue of LeBron James leaving the Lakers, and then how the Lakers build around Luka, and the Warriors is one of the obvious teams for LeBron. But imagine how many years he's played and how old he is. And the fact that he still plays well is a wonderment.
When you look at, I think I have a challenge with this, but I want to hear your side of it. When people compare eras, so when you take the Steve Youngs, the Troy Aikmans, those players, and then you compare them to like a Roethlisberger, and then you compare that now to a Patty Mahomes and Lamar Jackson and things like that. How do you view when people compare eras?
It's not a fair comparison. If you took the best basketball team today of NBA All-Stars and played it against Wilt Chamberlain and Jerry West and Bob Cousy and whoever, the contemporary players would blow them away. And that's because we have better conditioning, better nutrition, better healing modalities. We've got hyperbaric oxygen and red light and stem cells, and we have better training techniques, and we understand supplements. These players are significantly better athletes, better tone, better condition than their four. In other words, if you could bring Walt Frazier into today's training techniques, then he'd still be a good player. But don't ever compare yesterday with today. Look at baseball today. You've got all these pitchers who can throw almost 100 miles an hour. That wasn't true 40 years ago, right? They're just different skill sets. And then you have interludes like with steroids where they induce these hyper levels of performance. But today's athletes, I can tell you, in football, we measure them at the combine. How fast a 40 do they run? It used to be really fast to run a 4.7, and now it's a 4.2. They're faster. They can leap higher. They can move laterally quicker. We test them. We know. So it may be nostalgic, and you may be holding on to the people that you rooted for as a kid, but don't ever convince yourself that the superstar that you loved as a kid 40 years later would be competitive.
What about when people talk about the Jordan in his era and LeBron in his era? What is your take on that?
So make the assumption that if Michael Jordan came today, he would have benefit of all the training and all the rest of it. He would get the same benefit. But when you're trying to look at things, you need to set up metrics and criteria. How many NBA championships? How many, what were their stats? Ultimately, the goal is to win a Super Bowl or an NBA Finals or a World Championship. How successful were they in getting their team there? But then you break it down statistically in terms of points scored and field goal and percentage and 3-point percentage and all the rest of it. And you can compare those stats, but it's not a fair comparison because the athletes today are better.
When you witnessed the Super Bowl this year, Seahawks, Patriots, it did you enjoy the defensive struggles and that type of game, or do you like to see high offense?
I like to see high offense. All Americans like to see high offense. It's the challenge that we have in embracing soccer, right? Because we like games that have finite chances of success or failure on every play. And we like segmented sports where you get up and go to the bathroom. You got quarters, you got time periods, you got commercial timeouts, and all the rest of that. Soccer is a continuous play game without a lot of scoring. So it's the world's passion. And we're just now seeing it catch on a little bit in America. And this has been a really splendid World Cup for the game of soccer. And it's been a good experience in this country. It's all been favorable so far. And so then the question is, as World Cup ends, does this have a fundamental effect on American soccer? Do we have more American athletes playing soccer? Do we develop any of our best athletes into soccer players? Does the MLS flourish? The TV ratings go high. So you just question. Back in 1994, I represented the United States team in the World Cup, and I negotiated with the federation for them. And you can't compare that level of interest to what we're seeing today. It's much broader, but we'll see where it leads.
Do you see America grabbing a hold of it? Because just what you said, we were just having a talk the other day where watching a game that could end in a tie, and a lot of times does, and then goes to, penalty kicks, or extends a little bit and then goes to penalty kicks. For me, I tried to explain it to one of my friends. I said that would be like watching a NBA game and it tying and then going to free throws to be able to win the game. For me, I couldn't grasp it. I've got family that plays soccer, things like that. But for me, for the life of me, I don't see America grabbing a hold of it and running the way that they do with baseball, football. Football, basketball, baseball.
So we'll see what comes out of this World Cup, because the ratings are high. It's possible. But remember, when the ratings are high, 130 million people watch the Super Bowl. And, when they have 20 to 25 million people watching a soccer game, it's stunning. So relative to where they have been in this country, it's higher.
Mm-hmm.
Relative to replacing football or one of the core sports, not happening right now.
When does the NIL start? Does it start? Can a kid get NIL in high school?
Certain states outlaw that, like a high schooler can't in the state of Alabama do an NIL. But most states permit it, so you're talking about a 17-year-old.
So a 17-year-old, what type of training do you have, foundationally for a kid? Because when the NIL comes in, then money comes in, and then you were talking about the gambling aspect. The gambling aspect could say, hey, kid, if the game is decided by 4 points or less, you're still going to win. You still do your thing, but I need you to make sure that, or even the flip side of it, from a positive standpoint, I just bet on myself.
So they have, yes, I get you. Yeah. They have, so here's where I say unintended consequences again for the umpteenth time. Who represents that young person at that age is a marketing director. So the marketing director is handling the high school to college transaction and the transfer portal transactions. To be an NFL certified agent requires paying a fee, taking a test, which a good portion of people fail, going through background screening, following a strict set of regulations. Qualifying to be a marketing director takes nothing. It takes being able to sign a client. So some of the people that are doing these transactions, when you ask about, gambling, preventing off the field problems, those are all the things that I concentrate on with a rookie. But he's 4 years older and much more inclined to accept that when I talk with them about being a role model and making a difference in the world, when we talk about second career and finding other skills that we should hone, when we talk about health and safety and when it makes sense to think you've had too many concussions, no one's doing that for those young players. Now, some of the people that are signing players to NILs are also NFL certified agents or NBA certified agents, but a lot of them are not. And so you have people that really don't necessarily have any training, but they have persuasive skills over a young man and his family.
This last year, I think, you're not going to say it, I'm going to say it. I think you have the coolest Super Bowl party in the world. And, to experience it for those who get the opportunity. What I loved about it is at first I was like, yeah, Leigh Steinberg's, Super Bowl party. Yes, I want to go. I'm just in because this is going to be. But what I noticed was there was a purpose about it. The first one that I went to was in LA, and I got to see the brain health modalities. I got to see panels of which, when you said what you said earlier today, when you said that a kid should not play tackle football until their brain is fully developed. And then the follow-up question from the audience was, when are they fully developed? And you said 22 to 25. It was almost as if everyone took a gasp because you were willing to take a stand, even though everyone knows, you're the greatest sports agent that's ever lived, and this is your business. But from this last one, from your last Super Bowl party, what was like your favorite part of it? The thing that made your heart sing, specifically, maybe it was an interaction or something that you saw happen. What was that?
Well, it's it generally is we pick a charity and we try to help it. So one year in Haiti, they were having problems because of cholera outbreaks, impure drinking water, and we sent because they had an earthquake, and we sent a water machine that purified the water for 140,000 people a day. We've done Junior Olympics. We in New Orleans moved a single mother and her family in the first home they'll ever own. I really like the humanitarian awards because we give them to an owner, a general manager, a director of operations, a current player, and a retired player. And we recognize things they've done philanthropically. And then I like the fact that we're displaying new forms of healing modalities, which are good not just for athletes, but are good for anyone who wants to be healthy and brain function for a period of time. So we call it the Longevity Lounge, and we've got stem cell and Bimini and Nanovi and a whole series of healing modalities that will be good for any of your listeners. And we do that. And then we do the brain health seminar, which in San Francisco we did 2 hours of. And you have neurologists from around the world coming and speaking about the breakthroughs and speaking about what's happening in brain health. And so all of those things are fun. We actually had a sober lounge this last time for people who don't drink that had carefully curated mocktails.
Huh.
So we're trying to educate people, expose them, have a great time. We keep the level of noise ambient so you can actually network and have a real discussion. It's the antidote to the noisy, boozy, overcrowded, uh, dark parties that predominate during the week.
It, it it blew me away too, and I don't know if you thought of this when you first started the party, but everyone was so relaxed. And when I say this, it was almost as if you created a culture, and I'm so interested in this, that people were safe. Like when I was walking, I remember walking by one of my little pinch me moments. The first time that I went, the first time I went, I just went by myself. So I drove up to LA by myself. I come walking in, and as I'm walking past a booth, I look over, and you know how you notice something, but it takes a second to register in your head a little bit. Well, I turned and I saw it, and then I kept walking, and then I realized, oh, that was Bo Jackson. And for me, growing up, seeing Bo Jackson, I mean, I think arguably one of the greatest athletes that's ever been. And he was there, and it was as if he felt safe. He was just really, like, you could see him really interacting with the people as I walked past. As you know from my hat, I'm a huge Oilers fan, huge Warren Moon fan. I walk by, and there is Warren. And it's not fanfare Warren, everyone's crowded around. It's Warren shaking hands with people, saying hello. I walk past, I see Edgerrin James. Now, I had a problem with Edgerrin James because I'm a Tennessee Titans fan, and he gave us the business a lot, right? But did you intentionally curate that type of culture to help people to feel safe? And how did you do it if you did it intentionally?
Well, the um, we have a no autograph policy. I know what it takes to give an athlete a sense of having a good time and not, being relaxed and all the rest of it. So while we have people take pictures, we don't do autographs. We don't do signings of things. They know they're there for a good time. Um, and we have people from all sorts of backgrounds, big business, politics, big. We had the mayor of most cities, or the governor, or the whatever. It's you. You're all there to try to do something good for the world, and everybody there has a love of sports. So we have athletes from other sports. We have my past clients, current clients, and their families, and we want to make it a relaxing afternoon where you might learn something, you might find a modality or something that changes your life.
At this last one, last year, because it was up in San Jose, am I correct?
San Francisco.
Or San Francisco. So at that particular one, what turned you back into a little kid? What moment turned you back in? Because we all have those moments where it's either an interaction with a longtime friend or whatever it is, where we almost just relax and we laugh, we belly laugh, we just turn into that 10, 12-year-old self, right?
So everybody thinks at a party like that the other people are the celebrities. In other words, that the CEO of MasterCard is a celebrity to the athlete, that the singer or actress is a thing. Everybody looks at it that way. I thought it was sort of cool that we had the lieutenant governor and the attorney general there, and I had fun talking to them. So that was probably the moment where I went back into being a young kid interested in politics.
When we just had the NBA Finals happen, the Knicks winning for the first time in 53 years, which was amazing. I was fortunate enough to be there in San Antonio at Game 5 to be able to see it happen, and I got to share it with my son. It was amazing. What I did witness in those games was a collapse. When I say a collapse, you saw the 29-point, collapse. You saw every game that they lost. they were up by at least 10. What did you see in the teams, and more specifically in the individuals, during the series?
That the Knicks were tougher, that the Knicks had resilience, that the one game, there's no way they ever get back into it. They're so far behind, but they never gave up. And the key to winning in sports, Kelly, is what do you do in adversity? In football, the quarterback's thrown 2 interceptions, the crowd is booing, the center's looking at the quarterback like his play calling means he's on hallucinogens. And what do you do then? Can you compartmentalize, adopt a quiet mind, and elevate your level of play to take a team to and through victory? That was the Knicks. And they were behind all the time, and they came back all the time, and they never gave up. And it was a younger San Antonio team that hadn't really been through it before. And these were mildly older, tougher people who just wouldn't fold. And you never know. How do you respond in adversity? And then it was a test for San Antonio, and which they didn't meet, and they were favored. But it was sort of a wonderful thing, and people traditionally root against New York teams. I root against the Yankees consistently, but people across the country liked the Knick team, and they had some interesting characters and personalities.
Number one sports agent in the world, amazing philanthropist, incredible businessman, author multiple times. I'm going to add to that title, prophet. The reason why, there's no way, unless you're a prophet, for you to have wrote your current book with the Knicks doing what they did. Like, it was exactly what your book is what the Knicks did. And they used the pattern. Like, if you went through the 9 pillars, right? The comeback, that's exactly what it is. Like, do you accept the title of prophet? Because honestly, Leigh, I remember when you told me that you were coming out with this book, and I've been excited to be able to have you on. But how could you foretell the fact that the Knicks were going to embody, and take us through these stages and these pillars, because this is what the Knicks did to be able to come back from, there's no way they should have been able to do it.
So at some point when you're in adversity, you have to have a sense of proportionality, like I did with alcohol. I'm not a starving peasant in Darfur or Somalia. Don't have my name in Nazi Germany in the 30s. I'm not sick in any fundamental way. So somewhere the Knicks had to tell themselves, even when it looked dark, we're okay. Okay, we're okay, and we're going to be okay. And second of all, when you hit that downfall, that bottom, you've got to be able to see light at the end of the tunnel. You have to be able to visualize a thing. I was lucky. I was brought up by a father who was the ultimate optimist. So if we walked into a barn filled with horse defecation, we're sure that somewhere in that pile there's a pony that you can ride. So it's having that sense, and then it's having a system. It's falling back on what you did to get you where you were originally. In alcohol, it's the 12 steps, and working the 12 steps in order. But a lot of what I've been able to prophesize in sports and everything just comes from doing a lot of reading and a lot of talking to a whole lot of people and understanding where markets are going and where trends are going and where we are. So when I tell you there'll be a major scandal in gambling, count on it. I don't say that with any pleasure at all, but it's going to happen. And conference realignment, undercut. Um, I'm a Cal graduate, Berkeley. So when I walk across campus underneath the Campanile, I see the Pacific Ocean. And now Cal's in a conference that's in the Atlantic Ocean, looks at the Atlantic Ocean, the ACC. How does that make any sense? Where's the regional rivalries? Where's less travel time for student athletes?
Where did the Pac-12 go wrong?
They had a good TV offer, and the commissioner wouldn't take it, wanted more, and ended up getting nothing. Bupkis, much smaller deal, and it because of that, it made schools like UCLA and SC look at a much bigger payday from TV. It made teams like Washington and Oregon think, well, we're not in the right conference. And they created imbalance between the Pac 12 teams and the Big Ten and the SEC. And that caused those teams to leave.
I would like to think. I mean, again, I'm deeming you a prophet, and I would like to believe that you just knew that the Knicks were going to do what they did. Therefore, you write the book a couple years before it's in the process, and then it comes out right around that time. I would like to think this. Why was it so important at this point in your career to write this particular book, The Comeback?
Because there are people out there still struggling, and life will set you back. We all have reverses. It could be financial, it could be marital or relationships, it could be health, or it could be addictive substances. And invariably, life has its dips and has its situation where, as much planning as you do, things just don't work out. And so you're hit with unexpected challenges. And so I wrote the book to help people who were having their own crisis, but it didn't have to be alcohol or drugs or uh, gambling, or it could be financial, as I said, or any of the other causes. But what do you do? I wrote it to try to give inspiration to people who are experiencing life challenges, how they come back, how they fulfill themselves, how they emerge triumphant after tragedy.
When you talked about that there's a plan and then there's basically, I'm paraphrasing you, but there's a plan and then life happens, right? And every one of my entrepreneur friends or anyone who's been successful in any particular industry, this blows me away. So I need your advice on it because I'm a girl dad. Is anytime that you've seen that prominence in a certain industry, the kids most of the time invariably just go a completely different direction. You would think that they would, like I have a friend who's one of the top cosmetic dentists in the world. I would think that his kids would step in and then take the practice and continue to move it on. They went completely opposite. But I find this normal with kids. Do you have? I mean, you're now deemed a prophet, Leigh. Is there any reason for this or what you see for it?
Yes. When you have that dominant a father, then the question becomes, are you always going to be compared to him in that same business? Are you an owner's son in the NFL? Can you ever live up to the standards of the father? So by going into a completely different field, that young person is able to establish their own identity and be compared against the standard of excellence for that industry, not ever compared to the father. And you have to be conscious in parenting of the fact that you want to bring your kids up with self-confidence, a sense of security that whatever they choose is okay. You bring them up with the set of values, but you can't helicopter parent. You have to be there for the soccer games. You have to be there for the moments when they're having problems. And so I think it's actually can be very healthy for people to choose another field or another way of life. My daughter is not an agent. She works in social media. Um, and my son, my oldest son, teaches that my two boys are blind, teaches young people how to handle blindness and works in a clinic that way. And it's good because I don't want them to be stultified. If you walked into my house when my kids were growing up, there were no pictures of me, memorabilia, all that stuff. It all was the kids. They were the center of attention. And all I was Katie's dad or somebody's dad. You're trying to create space for them to be fulfilled in life and not always be compared.
One of the greatest things about the NFL is parity, right? And what I love this about the NFL, outside of this year, the Tennessee Titans going 17-0, going through the playoffs, home field, and winning the Super Bowl. What parity do you see happening this year?
It's the reason there will never be total parity is that certain organizations are run better. And the key, if they wanted to have a draft, Kelly, what they should draft are owners because it's their stability, vision, sense of purpose, their ability to hire the most talented front office people who can draft and scout and know the salary cap and the rest of it. And then a coach who establishes a culture. And you see it over and over again. Sean Payton goes to Denver. All of a sudden, they start to win. Ben Johnson goes to Chicago. They completely change the culture. Jim Harbaugh goes to the Chargers, changes the culture, immediate success. So that's really the key. Right now, after the trade for Myles Garrett, you have to assume that the Rams are the favorite for the Super Bowl. But you have all these younger teams, Broncos and Chargers and Bears and Carolina and Jacksonville that are all coming up. And I think Patrick Mahomes will be healthy and dominant again this year. So there you go.
You've made a career out of representing like the top guys in their field. I mean, when you look at it, I mean, the list is endless. But in the event, which probably wouldn't happen, but in the event that you had someone who wasn't like the number one or that wasn't at the top tier, how do you negotiate for that player? Because not everyone could be the Leigh Steinberg that has, I mean, literally, like if we list off all your clients, I mean, this is the Mount Rushmore. These are the 12 Mount Rushmores of sports. How do you negotiate for a kid who's maybe not the Patty Mahomes or Troy Aikman or Steve Young or Bren Roethlisberger? How would you do that?
Well, first of all, the draft in a sport like football or basketball takes care of it because the draft creates under a salary cap a slot. So there's not a whole lot of negotiability to that. So in other words, that player who you wish would be a first rounder is a sixth rounder. So he's going to get basically a slotted sixth round contract. Just remember that you're a father. It's like having kids. You hope they're all successful, but you love them anyway. And once I make a commitment to represent an athlete, it's there through thick and thin, whether he's an undrafted free agent or the first pick in the draft, you're still focused on him. And the second way is to do good research when the player becomes a veteran and establishes comparability. In other words, how does he relate to the comps in his field. What's his performance like? What are those players paid? What's his position? What are those players paid? You do extensive research that creates a reality that motivates what your asking price is.
Leigh, it's always a pleasure. I can't wait to, and I want to respect your time. I know your time is very, very valuable. And I wish that everyone could see your view, because your view is that to your left that's out to the water?
Yeah.
Yes. Okay. So if anyone wonders why Leigh has a smile on his face all the time, this is the view. And not only are you the greatest sports agent in the whole entire world, but you have the greatest view that has ever been. I've got an opportunity to be able to, connect with your daughter. Your daughter is absolutely amazing. I started the podcast because of my two kids. You've heard their names before, Maddox and McKenna. What advice would you have for Maddox and McKenna at this stage right now, what we're going through, whether it be through sports or anything like that? What would your advice be to Maddox and McKenna? And if you could use both their names, it would be awesome.
Hone your listening skills. Learn how to draw out another human being so you understand their deepest anxieties and fears, their greatest hopes and dreams. Peel back the layers of the onion so that you can get deep into their heart and mind and see the world the way they see it. Because looking at it from the other person's perspective, everything you do in life is going to involve interactions with other people. And you need to have that at a deeper level and bond.
Leigh, what's making you jump up and down right now? Like, what's making you belly laugh, have so much fun in your life, and smile like you're doing right now?
A great fiance, trying to make a positive difference in the world, trying to push back against racism and climate change and domestic violence and sex trafficking and bullying, and trying to make it a better world.
Well, you're doing that every single day. You are absolutely incredible. We're going to run a commercial. Stick around for me for a second, Leigh, but you're incredible as always. And for everyone out there, honestly, like, Leigh has been on the podcast more than anyone else. And I just want to thank you because, you are an incredible human being from the first time that I met you at Secret Knock, and you took the time and you made time stand still. And you pushed everyone away and you stayed present with me. You made eye contact. And I watched you do that with every single person you interacted with. And it has been the same over time. No matter how much light is on you, you always shine the light on other people. And it's an amazing thing to see, Leigh.
Thanks, Kelly.
You're officially off the hot seat. Stick around for a second, okay?
It's the vibe that raised us, made us, saved us. Love so strong that the hard times praised us. From base life roots to the freeway nights, we turn small rooms into non-spent